The Hobbit is my favorite Ghibli movie. How's that for a hot take to start my 100th anime video? First, a bit of backstory so you can see what I'm talking about. Oftentimes, when determining whether or not to watch a new anime that I haven't read the source material for, I take a look at the studio and creative staff behind the anime. This way, I usually have a good idea of what I'm in for. If it's Bones, I can expect excellent animation. If it's Trigger, I can expect to like the first 10 or so episodes and then hate the ending. If it's Madhouse, I can expect to never get a sequel. If it's Kyoto, I can expect to fall in love and probably cry my eyes out. If it's White Fox, it's probably going to be at least a little messed up. If it's Gainax, it's gonna be weird. And if it's Studio Ghibli, I know I'm in for a fun ride with great characters. In 1971, a new anime studio was formed, known as Topcraft. Famous for producing Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, they were also responsible for many hand-drawn titles produced by Rankin and Bass. Known for their claymation TV specials like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus, Rankin and Bass also produced traditionally animated movies, such as The Last Unicorn and The Flight of Dragons, both of which were also animated by Topcraft. Eventually, Topcraft would declare bankruptcy, and many of the talent that worked on those films would go on to found Studio Ghibli. Prior to that, in 1977, Rankin and Bass hired Studio Topcraft to make an animated version of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit. That's right, The Hobbit is a Ghibli film. Sort of. As I stated earlier, it just so happens to be my favorite Ghibli film. Mostly because Tolkien is a better writer than Miyazaki, but also because all the backgrounds were hand-painted using watercolors. I mean, just look at these images. 2001 brought us Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings, which was far better than anything most of the fandom expected. Up until this point, the only film versions of The Lord of the Rings was a partially rotoscoped animation made by United Artists in 1978, which only covered the first half of the trilogy, and the Rankin and Bass Return of the King in 1980, another Topcraft film. Neither of these movies were bad per se. In fact, the animated Lord of the Rings was a financial success. But the trilogy was still unfinished until Peter Jackson and New Line came along. The Lord of the Rings trilogy was a global sensation, and now, 20 years later, is still beloved the world over. Almost a decade after The Return of the King, Peter Jackson and New Line released The Hobbit. Even though The Hobbit is about half the word count of The Fellowship of the Ring, for some reason, greed, they decided to release it as a trilogy. Of course, it begs the comparison to the cartoon version of The Hobbit. There is no comparison. Rankin and Bass's 1977 The Hobbit blows the Peter Jackson version out of the water. The animated movie is tight, flows easily, is gorgeous to watch, has a better soundtrack, and is just all around a superior film. Is the animation clean and crisp by today's standards? Absolutely not. But remember, this is a 45-year-old movie. If you loved The Lord of the Rings and thought that The Hobbit was too long and boring like I did, let's be honest, unless Ian McKellen or Martin Freeman were on screen, the movies kinda sucked. You should absolutely check out the Rankin and Bass version of The Hobbit. For those who have never seen The Hobbit before, let me give you a brief summary. Bilbo Baggins, our titular Hobbit, is living a quiet life in his hole. Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole, nor a dry, bare, sandy hole. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort. One day, Gandalf, the wandering wizard, appears alongside 12 dwarves. These dwarves are the last survivors of Erebor, led by Thorin Oakenshield, the grandson of the last king under the mountain. They convince Bilbo to join them on their quest to take back the Lonely Mountain from Smaug, the last of the great dragons. In their adventures, they encounter trolls, goblins, giant spiders, elves, a shapeshifter, and eventually the Great Worm himself. Dungeons & Dragons takes most of its influence from The Hobbit. The idea of going on a great quest and defeating a dragon calls to us on a primal level. Doing great things and overcoming adversity is something most of us long for, at least once in our lives. The call to adventure is strong in us, even if adventures do make one late to dinner. I won't spoil the ending. You can watch it for yourself or read the book. Thanks for tuning in. Shorter video today, I know. I don't really have much to say about The Hobbit in comparison to the larger lore of Middle-earth. I read The Hobbit when I was about 10 years old, and my mom teased me that in order to get all the references in The Lord of the Rings, I should read the Silmarillion next. Being a precocious child, I did so. It took me most of 5th grade to finish it, but I still did nonetheless. Much has been said about Tolkien and his world building, and I don't feel the need to repeat it here. If you want to learn more about the works of Tolkien, you should pick up a copy of The Hobbit today. Once again, a huge shout out to my editor Cute Stuff. I couldn't make these videos without her. If you'd like to hire her to edit your own videos, there's a link to her Fiverr page below. Please like and subscribe for more content. I post new anime, manga, or light novel videos every Wednesday and Saturday. Or you can click here for more fantasy and isekai content. Stay safe, and I'll see you all again next time on Musings by Danon.